physically, mentally, culturally, spiritually, psychologically, whatever perspective you want to look at, nature is really important.
As a species, we have relied on our connection with nature and the earth forever. Without nature, we wouldn't survive. We're a part of nature as much as any other animal. However, we seem to be becoming increasingly disconnected from the natural world, a disconnection which is having drastic effects on not only our own health, but the health of our planet. But how much could connecting to nature really affect our well-being? And could psychedelics be used to enhance this connection?
My name is Anna Humber. I've lived in London for 9 years now. What else did you ask me to go with that? I grew up in Dorset. My dad was a farmer, so the first few years of my life, I think I was 5 when we left the farm, but my dad would take me out lambing and calving. There's loads of photos of me like feeding orphan lambs, and I can barely stand, and like carrying chickens around that are like half the size of me. It was quite idyllic in that sense. Just this love I have of animals, and then understanding the importance of nature.
So nature connectedness, or nature relatedness, as it's also known, depending on the measure used, has been defined as a sustained awareness of the interrelatedness of the self with the rest of nature. So it's capturing one's relationship with nature, and not just their feelings of connection towards it, but the degree to which they value contact with it and their feelings of pro-nature attitudes, awareness and behaviours as well. What's kind of interesting with the research that's been done on nature connectedness is it's much more about active engagement with nature than, say, passive kind of engagement. Like when you're actively, emotionally, experientially engaged and you're feeling a sense of wonder or awe, fascination, it's evoking emotions. And something else that's kind of come out of the work that's quite interesting is that time spent in nature is not a predictor of nature connectedness. It's much more about meaningful moments of appreciation and sort of engagement, connection.
I think I've learnt to adapt to living in a city compared to living in the countryside, and I've found ways to connect to the parts of nature that are important to me for my mental health and physical health. Having a dog in London has made a massive difference for me in that I'm up every morning, out into the daylight. My eyes, retinas are hit by daylight straight away, which is really important for your circadian rhythm, and there's health benefits that come with that. I also spend a lot of time in parks and in the cemetery, which sounds really depressing, but it's full of trees because it was originally planted as an arboretum. I think that has massively helped me. I do still really crave like open space, open countryside, literally to the point that it's like almost like a grief sometimes, but such a strong craving. And I think that comes from riding horses too, and this amazing sense of like being connected to this, essentially a wild animal, experiencing that connection, but then you're also out in the countryside, and there's such an amazing sense of freedom that comes with that.
Higher levels of nature connectedness have been shown to increase well-being, with some people using nature as a healing tool for their mental health.
There's a pretty solid body of evidence to show an association between well-being and nature connectedness, particularly a form of well-being called eudaimonic well-being, which is well-being that's centered on life meaning, vitality, self-actualization. So it's like a higher form of well-being, you could say, rather than hedonic well-being, which is like feeling good and happy, which nature connectedness is also related to. So I kind of view nature connectedness as a potential pathway towards human flourishing. Certainly not the only way, but it is a way.
In order to kind of maintain my mental health, or for it to be kind of optimal to what I need to be able to cope with this, the stresses of life, I know I need that time with nature or connecting to it in some way, whether that's, getting out of London and going to somewhere where there's more space. I think sometimes like the ocean can bring that too. Again, there's just this like appreciation for the vastness of it. And there's this sense of like irrelevance of your worries compared to the powerful nature of the ocean.
With nature having such a strong impact on physical and mental well-being, it's vital that it's protected. However, there seems to be growing ecological concerns that are affecting not only the people on this planet, but many other species.
We are in the middle of a massive ecological crisis, the likes of which we've probably never seen. We're in the middle of a sixth mass extinction, the biggest one in 16 million years, faster than any of the previous ones, and almost certainly all man-made. So we are really in a kind of deep ecological crisis.
Species extinction rate, I've heard a figure, is 1,000 times beyond what it otherwise would be at sort of ambient extinction levels. And this is across various different groups, mammals, birds, insects. There was a report published a few years ago trying to kind of get an overall picture of what state ecologically the planet is in. And the conclusions of it were pretty grim in that it said we're losing life, we're losing biodiversity, we're degrading ecosystems faster than we ever have, and that rate is only going up. And yeah, it's important to note as well, so obviously climate change is very topical. It seems to be a divisive issue, polarising issue for some, but it's biodiversity loss and climate change are separate. They're not one and the same, although they do overlap as well. So we face multiple environmental crises.
I've really struggled with the idea of having children and then leaving them in a world that I quite frankly know is fucked. Am I allowed to say fucked? Like that genuinely, that really scares me. And I guess I'm kind of angry at our parents' generation who just had no concept of what they would be leaving us with, and of the fact that I'm actually at a point where I'm questioning whether I want to have children because I don't want them to come into a world that I believe might be unlivable in by the time they get to my age.
Although there is clear ecological degradation around the world, there is a glimmer of hope.
The only places, interestingly, not undergoing ecological degradation, and in some cases actually improving, are areas inhabited by, managed by Indigenous people.
Indigenous peoples the world over only account for about 5% of the world's population, but they are stewards of about 80% of the world's biodiversity. So these are people who live in extremely high biodiversity regions and live in a kind of harmonious relationship with their natural world through a system of reciprocity, and that is you never take more than you need, you never take without first asking, and that everything is by communication. You always put something back, there's always an offering, there's a relationship with nature.
This relationship goes beyond how the Western world typically engage with or even understand nature.
So Indigenous shamans, if you want to call them, the word comes from the Tungus tribe, but we apply it to a whole group of magicos, spiritual practitioners who basically go into an altered state of consciousness at will in the name of their community and transcend time and space and bring back useful information for their community and communicate with the spirits of nature, what we call spirits of nature, but they don't really see a difference. And often they go into altered states through the use of various techniques, be it dancing, drumming, dreaming, diet, or what we call drugs, but they might call plant allies or medicines. In Indigenous communities and Amerindian cosmologies, it's about becoming the thing you want to understand. And you do that by going into an altered state, taking ayahuasca or peyote cactus, or whatever it is, and you transform into that aspect of nature and you become it because you are no different from it, and therefore you understand its properties and its qualities and its needs.
With such a different engagement with nature, psychedelics seem to add a depth and connection that we could learn from. But with the stigma around psychedelic substances, we could benefit in first learning a lot more about them.
So psychedelics, the word means mind manifesting. It's a term that kind of came around in the 1960s. And they're a class of psychoactive agents, things like magic mushrooms. Psilocybin comes from magic mushrooms, or LSD, or ayahuasca, which contains DMT. These things have been shown to give rise to massive qualitative changes in your entire state of consciousness, your sense of being, sense of self, your sense of time, your perceptions, how meaningful things are. And there's a lot going on neurobiologically when people take psychedelics. Some of the things we see are an increase in neuroplasticity, the laying down of new neural connections and pathways and dendrites and cells and things like that. At the same time, there's kind of functional shifts. So there's a region of the brain called the default mode network, which is a bit like your ego when you're kind of mind wandering, thinking about yourself, self-referentially in time, what you're going to do, what you just did. And that also has a constraining effect on brain activity ordinarily. That is reduced under the influence of psychedelics. And when those shackles come off under a psychedelic experience, the whole of the brain is communicating with each other in novel ways.
Although still in its early stages, a lot of research suggests that nature connectedness is enhanced by the use of psychedelic substances, particularly psilocybin, the psychoactive compound in magic mushrooms.
Psilocybin seemed to be enhancing people's proneness to absorption. So personality trait absorption is related to openness to experience, and it's encompassing the degree to which your mental, cognitive and imaginative faculties can be kind of wrapped up in mental experience. So people post psilocybin seem to become more sensitive to aesthetics in nature and appreciation for beauty in nature. And we know from other work that's been done that appreciation of beauty is a pathway to nature connectedness.
Mushrooms have this ability to make you really present. It gives you this ability to just see things in an even more kind of beautiful, profound way. Like once we did them in the back garden and we watched the bats and the clouds, honestly, for I think about 2 hours, like a group of like 5 of us, and we're just lost watching the clouds rolling over across the garden and the bats darting around. And we've got some beautiful plants in the back garden too that kind of all fall over in like a canopy. So I think we all just felt really safe and held.
So from our survey research, and this is from people's self-report, of those people who had taken psychedelics, everybody in our survey said that they'd made them feel more connected to nature. So that's a change in people's attitudes. But when you look at people's reported behaviours as well, the majority of people said taking psychedelics had made them change their diet. Just over half of them said it made them increase the amount of gardening they do, which is, quite an astonishing thing. And a good minority of people had changed their careers as well. Said they'd quit whatever jobs they were doing or career paths they had to do something more ecologically orientated.
I've seen before when I've taken mushrooms, everything that's going on in the leaf. Like I've been able to see every cell. I've been able to see the movement of water and of particles. I don't know, I think it's my mind just reminding me of the intricacies and the fact that nature, plants are alive. It's just a level of appreciation that they bring that if you already have that appreciation, it just makes it stronger. But I can imagine if you haven't had that connection to nature before, you can suddenly see things in a different way. Like even in a park in London, I can imagine if it was someone who hadn't before appreciated the canopy of trees and the shadows they cast and the way leaves have these amazing structures and shapes and colours. Mushrooms could, I would think, help them to see that.
This may seem like a strong reason to put forward psychedelics as a cure-all for our disconnection with nature, but there's nothing stopping us from going out and finding that connection without it. Perhaps in the future, this research could be used to help people connect with nature, but until then, we can increase our own connection by discovering more of the natural world around us.
We're all connected, and if you understand ecosystems, you understand the role of everything within an ecosystem. And we can't survive without them. And I think that's important to understand and to realise.
Connecting to nature is wired into us. The natural endogenous state of children is to be curious with the world around them. And I think part of it is not losing that and cultivating that because it will give you so much back. So part of connecting with nature is like paying attention. It's learning to pay attention and tune into the world around you. And the more you do that, the more you will kind of get back from that.
The more connected you are with nature, the more time you spend in nature, the better that is for your well-being, and then also the better it is for the environment as well. And so it has this kind of beautiful positive feedback loop of just making everything better for everyone, including yourself.